Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel and welcome to another monthly reading wrap up. Today we're going to go over all of the books that I read in my all horror in October reading. So if you actually want to see me individually reading these books, doing a whole reading vlog, I did do a full month-long reading vlog for reading all horror in October, which I love to do. I will put it up here as well as in the description down below. So if you want more in-depth, don't want this whole, kind of quick spiel of these books, you want to see them all in full, check out that video. But if you do want the TLDR and you want just a little bit of a brief on each of these books, let's go over that today. So I did end up reading 7 books in October. I think is the most that I've read in a month this year so far, which is typical for my Octobers because I do tend to go through horror a lot faster, and that was so good for me. But although I did read 7 books, I did only read 2,096 pages. It's actually like 40 or 50 more than that because A Dowry of Blood, which I read this month on Storygraph, is like 30 or 40 pages shorter because the epilogue isn't really included. So give or take a little over 2,000 pages. At least I met my goal, but still, I wanted a little bit more, especially with 7 books, Of course, because I'm reading all horror this month, my moods were tense, dark, mysterious, and emotional. Not shocked there. And then the same with the genres. I read 6 books that were in the horror genre. I'm not sure which one isn't considered horror. If I had to guess, it'd probably be Don't Let the Forest In. And then it was LGBTQIA+, thriller, fantasy, young adult, short stories, romance, and historical romance. I remember. My average rating for the month was a 4-star, which makes perfect sense to me because a lot of these books I gave a solid 4-star. So that's perfect. And that's just kind of it for my stats for the month. So let's go ahead and jump into this beautiful stack. Honestly, it was such a good reading month. So starting off the month strong, I wanted to read one of my most anticipated books for the year, and that was 13 Months Haunted by Jimmy Giuliano. I read Dead 11 by Jimmy Giuliano last year, I think, and I gave it 4 stars and I really enjoyed it. And it's one of those 4-star books that I think I could now in retrospect go back and give it 5 stars. Which, speaking of, before we get into this, I know I just did tier ranking all my 5-star books, my 5-star reads. I think it might be better if I tier ranked all of my 4-star reads because some of those I think I would give a 5-star. We'll see, there's a lot of those. But anyway, so I was really excited for 13 Months Haunted because I did enjoy Dead 11 so much, and I mean, the premise of this was just so good. And just like with Dead 11, I did end up giving this 4 stars as well, which makes me really excited for Jimmy Giuliano's next book. But in this one, we are following this girl named Piper Lowry. She is a librarian, and she sometimes works at the middle school with the kids, and one day she shows up to kind of be there with the kids, and she sees there's a new student named Avery there, and Avery is not alone. She is there with her mom, which is strange because typically, yes, kids can have student aides, but student aides aren't typically your parents. So she's like, first of all, that's a little strange. And then she starts to hear the rumors from other kids that Avery and her mom are witches, and that something very tragic happened to Avery's sister and Avery's dad, and that's why they had to move to this town. So of course our main gal Piper becomes kind of entranced with this story, instantly believes everything that's happening, and decides to kind of investigate herself, and ends up finding a lot more than she bargained for. This gives all the perfect like Y2K nostalgia. Piper runs like a blog. She's sending instant messages to people. They're listening to CDs, they're VHS tapes. Like there's just so much Y2K nostalgia in this, and the whole like premise of it, the whole I guess like big picture is very nostalgic for me, and I really enjoyed reading those parts because it just like, I don't know, it just takes you back to better times. Better times is hilarious. But I had such a good time with this one. It says it's ideal for fans of Stephen King and Stranger Things from Craig DeLuey. I agree. I think it's like a perfect little slow build, suspenseful horror, and then once you start to find out the big picture, it all kind of comes together so nicely, and I really, really enjoyed the ending. I have such a difficult time with horror endings. Sometimes I really just like love the book, and then the ending I'm just not happy with. Like if the ending doesn't go the way I like, I tend to not like the book then afterwards, even though I enjoyed the journey, But I think this ending was really perfect, and I love when there's like a hook at the end, and it was just so good. So if you enjoyed Dead 11, or if you even like liked Dead 11 a little bit and are interested in this, or if you just want all the Y2K nostalgic horror feels, this might be right up your alley. I really enjoyed 13 Months Haunted. Next, I read my only 5-star of the month, and man, the hype is so real for this book. I read Bloom by Delilah S. Dawson. This is a perfect little horror novella. I mean, I have heard everyone talk about how good this book is, and I think sometimes when I see that or when I hear that, I get nervous and I'm like, okay, everyone likes this, I won't. And I'm like, why is that? I don't know, because I end up always being in the same boat, well, for the most part. But this was just so perfect. The writing was stunning in this book, first and foremost. The descriptions were so lush and beautiful, and I felt like I was like actually in the story. I love when an author can do that. So in this book, we are following Rosemary. She goes by Ro, and she is kind of like a young professor. She's a little bit too young for her position, but because she's so smart, whatever, that truly doesn't matter. But she moves to this town because her boyfriend cheated on her, and she wants a fresh start. And she decides one day on a Saturday to go to a farmer's market, where she becomes entranced with this stall and this woman named Ash who sells soaps and plants and cupcakes. The cupcakes are described so good in this book, mouth-wateringly good, and they sort of develop a relationship. She comes every Saturday. She's really excited to see Ash. Ash seems really excited to see her. It becomes like a really budding, beautiful relationship. Ash invites her back to her farm to kind of see the greenhouse and see how everything's run. And I think if you don't go into this knowing it's horror, it is a beautiful little romance. Like, it truly is. But there is a lot of red flags about Ash. Things are really weird, and the ending, once again, of this is perfect. Like, I truly think if I had to pick, well, that's actually, I don't know. I think a lot of these would make really good movies, but I think this would make such a great movie, because that ending was so movie perfect. Like, it was just like that perfect, quick ending that I love. Same with 13 Months Haunted. Like, the endings were just so good to me, and that really solidified that 5-star, because, you know, it starts to build up to the climax. Like, a lot of things are happening towards the end, and you think it's gonna end, and you're like, okay, and then that ending happens, and it's just absolutely perfect. And if you've been thinking about reading this one, it is so short, you guys. Like, it is exactly 200 pages, a quick, short, perfect, punchy horror read. It is beautifully written. It was my only 5-star of the month, but I'm telling you, it was just so perfect. I'm so glad I finally read this. Then I really wanted to read a short story collection for the month, and I have an Eric LaRocca short story collection on my TBR, which I was going to read, but then my Aardvark book box came in, and I was so excited because Aardvark published like their own self-published anthology, and it is One Bad Night and Other Stories. It has a bunch of incredible authors in this. We have Kay Chronister, Del Sandine, Kylie Lee Baker, Rachel Harrison, CJ Lead, Jennifer Thorne, S.A. Barnes, and Stephen Graham Jones. I have read from a huge chunk of these, and I was so excited. You can't get this book anywhere other than through the Aardvark subscription, which I think is kind of fun, but also I really hope they open it up at some point to where other people can read it and get it, because these stories need to be shared. They're so good. Overall, I gave this anthology 4 stars, but I have a couple of stories in here that I think are just absolutely incredible. The first story by Kay Chronister, The Two Observers of the Slaughter Rites on Gannett Island, it started with such a bang. I was so entranced by that story, obsessed. I also really enjoyed Red Tide by CJ Lead. Both of those authors I have never read from before, but I have 2 books on my TBR from both of them. I have from Kay Chronister, I have The Bog Wife, and then from CJ Lead I have Mayfly, so like now I really, really want to get to those. And then 47 Pineview Way by Jennifer Thorne. I don't have anything from Jennifer Thorne on my TBR. That story, I don't even want to say I liked it, because that story actually like was one of my fears. It's like an anxious mother drops their child off at like a birthday party sleepover, and then the next morning shows up and the house isn't there. I almost threw up reading that story. I was so anxious. Yeah, this was such a great little anthology. I had such a good time reading this. If you want to hear more information about each of those stories, check out that All Horror in October video. I talk about each story there. I really had a good time with this one though. I'm so glad I chose this. 4 stars overall for this anthology. There was a couple I didn't really care for, but to be honest, they were all so good that I enjoyed it. Next, another 4-star read, The Eyes Are the Best Part by Monica Kim. I knew I had to get to this month. I have been wanting to read this since last year when it was a part of the Goodreads Choice Award in the horror section. I think it might have won. I'm not 100%, don't quote me on that, but I knew I needed to read this one. And I mean, it truly delivered. It was a different genre of horror that I have never read from before, and I loved it. It was so crazy. It was just so wild. So in this book, we are following Yaiwan. She lives with her mom and her sister, and her father has just left their family, leaving her mother absolutely destroyed. And their mom does everything to kind of try and bring their father back initially. So she's making these elaborate dinners, and she's telling Yaiwan and her sister to eat the fish eyes because the eyes are the best part. And, you know, that's just kind of like the intro to the story. And then slowly but surely, her mom decides to start dating, and she dates this white man with blue blue eyes who has a fetish for Asian women, and Yaiwan sees it instantly, and it's just a little bit too on the nose and disgusting. Like reading those parts were so cringy for me, but she becomes obsessed with his blue eyes, and because her mom always talks about fish eyes and how fish eyes are the best part, and the way that she describes eating the fish eyes is so gross and disgusting, but she becomes fixated on eyes, and especially his blue eyes, and she wants to eat them. So she ends up kind of spiraling, going into a female rage spiral, and dreams about his eyes and wants to eat his eyes, and anytime she sees anybody with blue eyes, she wants to eat them, and slowly but surely she unravels and things progress and get crazy. Again, the ending of this was so good, and I love when books kind of end on that like little bit of a cliffhanger-esque ending. I think this was such a great read. I can see why it was one of the best horror reads last year. Again, if you haven't read it and you love horror, I actually feel like I'm probably the last person to have read this book, but I really loved it and I can't recommend it enough. It is a very kind of almost good for her type story, in my opinion. So I loved The Eyes of the Best Part. And then I was kind of in the mood for a vampire story, so I read A Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson. Again, a 4-star read. I feel like I'm going to mispronounce her name every single time I talk about it. I think it's Constanta. It could be Constanta. I'm not sure. But in this book, we are following Dracula's first bride as she writes a love letter to him, explaining why she had to kill him. And in this book, I really adore the fact that she's writing this love letter to him, and she even says at the beginning, I will never name you because you don't deserve that, and I think that's crazy. So every time she refers to him, she'll say you or he or him. He is never named in this book, which, like, honestly, once again, good for her. And this tells the story of how she became part of the undead, how he changed her, their lives together as they traveled, as they did things together. The new brides that he brings in, we get to meet Magdalena and a little bit of Alexi and get to hear a little bit of their stories, and we kind of follow the journey as she slowly decides she's going to kill him. And this is so beautifully written. Like I said, it's a love letter. Like, it is like, yeah, she's talking about how she's gonna kill him, but it's a love letter to him in such a beautiful way. Like, the writing was just so pretty, and like, oh, I just passed one I thought I really liked. Like, this little section right here is just so beautiful. She says, I thank my Lord that this is when you loved me best, when I was freshly made and still as malleable as wet clay in your hands. Like, she like talks about how much she loves him, but then you can kind of see her slowly descending into not madness necessarily, but wanting to kill him. And it just, the story is so beautifully written, and I just enjoyed it so much. I couldn't give it a full 5 stars because I wanted more. Like, yes, we got her story and her kind of journey together, but I wanted more of the other brides as well. I feel like we got a little bit of Magdalena, but then we hardly got any Alexi, and I really wanted to know their story of how they all traveled together because they were together for quite some time. And then of course at the end we did get the Encore of Roses, which is essentially the epilogue of how they all were together afterwards, and it's kind of more present day, which I really liked. They were all like in New York, which I thought was really cool. So I really enjoyed this. I really enjoyed the writing. Very glad I finally got to it. And this to me was more of like a beautiful, whimsical, fantasy-esque horror. And I don't know, after reading like The Eyes of the Best Part, I felt like it was like the perfect time to read this, and I really enjoyed it, so I gave it 4 stars. But I did want a little bit of a break between kind of like the whimsical fantasy-esque of it, and I decided I wanted to read a haunting story. Well, this isn't technically a haunting story, it's more of a possession story, but I knew another one I was really looking forward to this month, Play Nice by Rachel Harrison. I have another Rachel Harrison on my TBR. I haven't even hauled this yet, but I was like, I just want to read it. I want to read it because it just got released and I was so excited. And again, I ended up giving this 4 stars. In this book, we're following Cleo, and I have to say, of the 2 Rachel Harrison books that I've read so far, I really think she tends to write her female main characters as super fun, like really witty, really funny, very sarcastic from both of the books that I've read from her so far, and I really enjoy that. But in this, we're following Cleo. She's like a fashion influencer living in New York, and she gets a call that her mom has passed away, and her mom and her are not close at all. She ended up growing up with her dad and her 2 older sisters. Her mom lost custody of them because of this house, essentially. The mom essentially descended into madness. The dad took the kids away. He thought she was crazy because she claimed this house was possessed. passed. And so Cleo and her sisters end up inheriting this house, and the sisters want nothing to do with it. But Cleo's like, I'm gonna renovate this house. I'm an influencer. I can use this as content. So she goes to the house and she finds her mom's book. Her mom wrote a book about this possession. And if you think like Riley Sager, Home Before Dark, it's kind of that situation. You're reading the book as you are also reading Cleo's story. Cleo and her sisters decided when they were younger they were never going to read the book, but she finds the book and she's like, you know what, I'm gonna read it. So we're following along the story of the possession timeline, I suppose, as well as the current timeline. And yeah, the house is absolutely possessed by a demon, and it's really great to read about. There is very few horror in this book. It is more family drama, like the drama with the sisters and the dad, like it is, and the mom, I guess. It's very drama, and then the few horror bits we get are so good that I think it's totally worth it. I think the drama is also really good to read about too. Like it was really interesting, and again, like I said, Cleo was super witty, so it was kind of fun to read her banter, and there is a little bit of a romance in it as well because the next door neighbor is really hot and he comes and hangs out with her a lot. So I really enjoyed it. I think again the ending was a very open-ended, good ending, and I really liked that. And yeah, I gave this one 4 stars. If I had to say though, between Play Nice and Black Sheep, which I read Black Sheep earlier this year, I do think maybe I like Black Sheep a little bit more, like a little bit more. But also I say this often because I did the same thing with Emily Henry, but the first book I read from Emily Henry was People We Meet on Vacation, and that is my favorite Emily Henry. And not a lot of people, that's not a lot of people's favorite, but I think it's because it's the first one I read, it's my favorite. So far, Black Sheep is still my favorite. Does that make sense? This is a good one. If you've been wanting to read it, I think it's worth it. And then last but not least, I kind of ended the month on a little bit of a disappointment, and I'm really bummed about it because just like I said with Bloom, a lot of people recommend this book, and I thought because a lot of people liked it, I too would like it, and I ended up not loving it as much as I wanted to, and that is Don't Let the Forest In by C.G. Drews. This is a YA fantasy horror, kind of, and I think that's probably why I didn't love it as much, because the horror is so minimal. Like this horror and this horror, yes, they're both minimal, but this was more like spooky and this was more like, okay, kind of horror. It was still such a great little story, but I just didn't love it as much as everybody else. So in this, we're following Andrew and his twin sister are going to this boarding school. They're from Australia. I don't really think that ever matters in the grand scheme of things, but they're from Australia. The boarding school's in like Virginia, I think. And he and his sister are best friends with this kid named Thomas, and he's in love with Thomas. He loves Thomas so much, and they show up to school for the new year, and something had happened the previous year that Andrew still like can't remember, so that's kind of in the back of our heads the whole time we're reading this. They show up, Thomas is being questioned by police because they think he killed his parents, and so he won't answer any questions for Andrew. Andrew's like, tell me, and Thomas is like, I can't, I'm protecting you. Very strange situations. The woods are blocked off for this school, which they never were blocked off before. So there's all sorts of like creepy kind of things happening this school year that we're trying to figure out as the reader. And then come to find out, we know that Andrew writes these like dark fairy tales and then Thomas draws them. And soon we find out that these drawings are coming to life and the monsters are real. And I think that premise alone is really great. But just like with Play Nice, it's more of this like relationship drama between Thomas and Andrew and how obsessed they are with each other, which I liked to read, but the horror was so, I don't want to say minimal because it was there, but this just wasn't what I expected. It felt very fantastical. It felt more along the lines this versus an actual horror. And it is YA, and maybe I should have like, I guess, realized that going into it, but it is such a beautiful book. I actually, before I even read this, picked up Hazelthorn by C.G. Drews from my Book of the Month pick, and now I'm a little bit concerned because I didn't love this so much, and a lot of people that are reading Hazelthorn are saying it's very similar, so I'm a little nervous. But I mean, it was beautiful enough and it was a good enough horror, but it just wasn't my favorite. And I feel bummed saying that because I ended the month kind of on a lower note and because I know a lot of people really like it. However, all in all, I did have a fairly good reading month. Like I said, I had an average of a 4-star. I found a really amazing 5-star this month, and I had some really, really great reads. I mean, this is such a good little like section of books here, but they were all so amazing. So if you want to hear a little bit more in depth, again, check out that vlog. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Nonetheless, go ahead and subscribe if you're not already, and I'll see you guys in my next one. Bye guys.